Funny how they switch up quick when they realize that your name buzzing. Funny how they all wanna hop on board when they see the wave coming. Funny how they wouldn't put me on a tour, now they hit me up and say, I hope you doing well, we should do a tour or something, man. Stop! We ain't doing nothing, got my own thing going, that's the way I like it. Too many cooks in the kitchen, that's a problem I ain't never gotta worry about. 12 people on a song, man, to each his own, but for me, that's a little wild. Got enough people in my business, I don't need another hand dipping in the pot. I don't need nobody showing me the ropes, I don't need you telling me to do my job. I don't need to hear you say that I'm the GOAT. I don't need you asking me to switch your style. I don't need you laughing when I tell a joke. I don't need you faking, trying to crack a smile. I don't need you, I don't need you, I don't need you telling me it's been a while. I don't need the label breathing down my neck. I don't need the venue telling me it's loud. I don't need you talking when I'm trying to rap. I don't need my name coming out your mouth. I don't need you using me to get respect. I don't need a picture with you for some clout. I don't need you, I don't need you, I don't need you telling me you got some doubt. Worry about yourself. Yeah, I don't need your help. Yeah, what's your name? What's your name? What's your name? Doesn't ring a bell. Every time I look down and your number pops up on the cell. Shake my head, threatening me, trying to get me to respond well. If you really knew me, you would know that that's the quickest way to make me turn my back on you. And every time I look, yeah. On even on my off days, right? Even when I'm off base, life living like tomorrow ain't promised to me. Gotta get it too. Strong suits. I've seen it take a toll and be harmful. I've seen what it can do when I got both of my arms full, but still continue to pile more on my back though. I learned at a young age, if you want to do something impactful, then you gotta be willing to sacrifice and really go after it with everything that you have, cause if you don't, it ain't never gonna happen. Listen, gotta prevail, gotta excel. Think I hit my peak? No, I just started climbing the hill. Kill or be killed. Well, if that's the way that you feel, I hope you know you about to get the raw end of the deal. I need to meditate, I ain't got no room to grow. I would never say conversations with the Lord should be every day. Reconnecting with my core, get my head on straight, praying on my downfall. Let her pray. Resume, check the resume. Set the pace, I don't hesitate. Yeah, just get it done. Let me demonstrate, demonstrate, demonstrate.
And we are live. Hey, what is up, everyone? Welcome back to my live stream. My name is Tyler Ramsby. Do want to let you guys know right away, I'm streaming in 3 different platforms. You can join me on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitch. On YouTube and LinkedIn, you can join us just under my name, Tyler Ramsby. And over on Twitch, I stream under the name hack_smarter. But I am here with the one and only Tiberius. Yo, Tiberius, dude, welcome to the live stream.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And the audio is working. Okay, cool. Guys, I don't know if the rest of you live stream. I know Tiberius does, but it's like when you do a live event, everything works up until you're ready to do it. But hey, as far as I can tell, we have it all working. For those of you in chat, if anything seems off, sounds off, please let me know. I'm doing the interview and trying to manage all the live streaming stuff. So if anything's off, let me know and I will do my best to fix it. But Tiberius, let's just begin with an introduction, although honestly, you probably have no need for an introduction. For those who do not know who you are, who the heck is Tiberius besides some guy from the Roman time period?
Yes, I'm a web app pen tester. I've been doing web app testing for, I think, going on 14 years now. But I also got into content creation. I think it's like slightly pre-COVID. So it's almost 5 years ago now. Doing Twitch streams, YouTube videos, etc. And I also, I wrote a few privilege escalation courses. I wrote a few tools that are relatively popular. But yeah, that's basically what I do now is a lot of content.
Yeah, and we'll dig into all of those tools. I think I first heard of you through auto recon, which I'm guessing is probably your most popular tool, when I was studying for the OSCP. Yeah. And I also remember, geez, you probably don't remember this, dude. This was like maybe 2 years ago, back when I first started live streaming. Like, I started on Twitch and YouTube, and usually there was one viewer, and it was like me on my smartphone, like making sure the stream was okay. And I remember looking at the chat, like there was like 5 people there, and you jumped in the chat, and I was like, oh my goodness, like the auto recon guy, the one and only Tiberius is in my chat. Like it blew my mind. You have no idea. And then just the fact that we have the opportunity now to talk is amazing. But as you shared, you've been in InfoSec for a long time, and a lot of the people watching this are trying to land their first job as a junior pen tester. So maybe they're in IT support, maybe they're in general cybersecurity, but they want that pen testing job. What are some key skills or concepts you recommend from your experience in the field as a whole?
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Because like when I entered the industry, and I obviously did it as a junior pen tester, but that was like 14 years ago, and you could kind of just stumble your way into it. And these days it's like, do junior pen test roles even exist? Like they do, definitely, but it's like it's so difficult. I feel like you have to have these days like such differentiators. Like in the past, it was okay to like come in as a complete newbie and just like learn on the job. And it's still true to some extent. Like a lot of the time you will be like nobody's expecting a junior pen tester to come on board and just be an amazing hacker, right? You're still going to learn some stuff on the job. But I think you need some differentiators. And that's the kind of stuff that just comes out in interviews. So, having a personality, being able to talk to people, like soft skills like that is actually really important, because ultimately, like a lot of people forget, if you're a pen tester, you're going to be dealing with customers like directly. You'll be talking to them, usually multiple times during an engagement, like from whether it's like on the scoping call initially to communicating findings, like during the actual test, but then like the readout call and being able to defend your findings. So I think, yeah, being able to actually talk to people, having, converse without sounding awkward is really, really important.
Can I pause you right there? Let me just follow up
Yeah.
on that, because a lot of people watching this who might be in the community, that's honestly a struggle. Like, it's easy for me and you to probably say that because like we live stream for fun. Like we're comfortable being on camera and being in front of a microphone. But I would argue, and I think we'd agree, the majority of people in this field, like they do not want to be on camera. They don't want to be talking to a microphone. They don't want to be giving speeches and things like that. Do you have any advice for people who are honestly have terrible soft skills or just are super anxious about talking to other people? Like anything to help them overcome that, or some disciplines they should put into place?
I think ultimately, like there's so many things you could do, but I think what it comes down to is just practice. Like it's not, yeah, I mean, even if you are a naturally socially awkward person, like you can sort of condition yourself to at least, on a call, sound like a human, you know. And so, and yeah, it will be tough for a lot of people, but I think definitely it's something that if you just keep doing it, and if you put yourself out there and sort of do some kind of like exposure therapy, then you can get better at it. And ultimately, yeah, even if it's like not appearing on webcam, like most of the calls I do, I don't appear on webcam. I'm just a voice at the other end of the call, like walking through the PDF report. But yeah, it's just being personal and personable to people, I think, and you just get better at it over time. So I think and a lot of these, I think what's really helpful is some of these new exams where you have the actual readout call as part of like the pen test exam, which is really useful because that gives you like something to practice. So I think that's a good skill to have.
So good. And I will just say, for those of you watching the live stream, I am doing my best to keep my eye on the chat. If you guys have questions for Tiberius, let me know in the chat. I'll do my best to get to them if they're good questions. That's my caveat, I'll say, and if I'm not already planning on asking them. But back to the original question before I totally interrupted you. Some of those key concepts someone should focus on becoming a junior pen tester. You said you really need to set yourself apart. Part of that is social skills. Is there anything else that you would add to that?
Yeah, report writing is a big one. Like the report is one of the most important things that's going to come out of the pen test. Like it's awesome if you're a great hacker and you can find a load of vulnerabilities. That's great. It's almost meaningless if you can't write them up into a report that ultimately helps explain to a customer who may not be as technically competent what like how you found them and what the actual exploit could do, like what the impact is, but also like how to mitigate it. Like I feel a lot of people, when especially if you spend your time just doing CTF boxes, like okay, you know how to exploit something, but how would you fix it?
Mm.
And do you know you know how like do you know multiple ways that you could recommend to a customer? Like say if a customer comes back and says, well, we can't implement the fix that you've sort of told us, is there anything else? Like do you know all the potential ways to fix a particular vulnerability? And that's kind of important too. Now luckily most companies you'll have some like reporting engine and you'll have a lot of like mitigation techniques already built into it, but you still need to be able to know those, to be able to explain them on a readout call. If a developer's on the call and is like, well, I don't really know what you mean by parameterized queries or something, like, can you explain that to me? So I think being able to write a report, being able to understand these concepts is really important too.
Yeah, that's super helpful. I remember my first like foray into actual remediation. I found a CVE in, I think it was Go CMS, because they're open source. I found the CVE and got it like reported and everything. But then I did a code review and patched my own CVE, and it was way more difficult than I was expecting. I mean, from my perspective, I was like, hey, here's this vulnerability, freaking just patch it, right? But just patch it is a lot more difficult said than done, because there's things you can break, there's different things you need to keep in mind. So do you have any advice for people who recognize like all their training has been on CTF platforms? They can find cross-site scripting or find these different web vulns, but they really don't know how to patch it. Do you have any resources, code review, open source stuff? Like what would you recommend at getting better at that?
Yeah, I think honestly, OWASP's testing guide is pretty good. So OWASP has a lot of good resources in general, I think. But yeah, if you go to their testing guide, they will have like mitigation techniques and strategies. They have like they've actually changed from what used to be like exploit cheat sheets to prevention cheat sheets.
Mm.
So they have sort of morphed into this more defensive organization, I think now, which is good, I think. But the prevention cheat sheets, like if you go to the XSS prevention cheat sheet and you thought like preventing XSS was just like, oh yeah, you just need to encode it, that's it, done. It's like, well, actually, there's a ton of different ways to encode stuff. And there's other mitigation techniques that you might not know about. And when it comes to stuff like client-side template injection, which is a really weird form of XSS, like encoding does nothing. So like you need to know all those different techniques, and those cheat sheets are really helpful. So I would definitely recommend reviewing those. And as to the point about like what if you just do CTFs, I think honestly like try and get into some kind of bug bounty like stuff. Try and actually go for real targets, even if you don't find anything really that cool, or like you find something that's a duplicate. Like a duplicate's fine, you still found something, but like look into what you actually could recommend to fix that, or how you could fix that. And I think that would be helpful for sure.
That's so good. And obviously your background is web app pen testing is what you've done for
Yeah.
a long time and kind of what you're an expert at. Do you recommend people begin with web app skills or network skills? I know, like from my perspective, when I was getting in the field, I was studying for things like the OSCP and going through like TryHackMe, and at least at that time, almost everything was like network based, maybe some Active Directory, but like the web app skills consisted of like do a file upload bypass just so you can get a shell on the remote computer, and then focus on Privesk. And when I got into the field, I was like, wow, this is very, very different from what I'm actually doing in the field. So how important are web app skills? And is that a specific skill set you encourage people to focus on from the beginning, or should they focus on something else to land that junior role?
I think it's an interesting question, because I think when I mean, at least when I was a junior, I sort of went into the industry. I already had a developer background, not professionally, but I knew how to code websites. I had coded websites in the past. So I understood how like web applications worked, which was useful. And then when I became a pen tester, junior pen tester, I was exposed to the network side of things, and I kind of just learned on the job. Um, and I think for a lot of juniors, that's how it probably is today as well. You'll just do a mix of everything. The issue is most tests are web apps. Like, and it's not even close. It's something like 70% of tests for pen test companies are usually web apps. And if you think about it, it kind of makes sense because if you're a company, most companies just have one network. Like, yeah, some will have like segmentation. They might have like a separate like PCI network or whatever. But on average, like it's I guess on average it's slightly above one network, right? And so you'll get that tested like maybe, a small company might get it tested once a year, a big company might get it tested like 4 times a year or something. But on that network, you'll have tons of different web apps. And a lot of people forget, like when you think web app, like we're not talking about just like, oh yeah, google.com, right, as a web app. Like, yeah, there are a ton of public web apps. Everything that you visit in your web browser is technically a web app, right? But there's so many more web apps that you will never see because they're just on private networks that, they're bespoke applications that have been developed internally for different companies, basically taking over what used to be a thick client application that everyone would run. And so there's loads of those. Each company has like a huge number of web apps usually. And sometimes there'll be public code, like there might be like an internal wiki, right, that uses
Sure.
MediaWiki or something, which is fine. Like that is usually not that insecure because that stuff gets tested all the time. But then, yeah, it's the bespoke applications that develop that you really need to test. So it's interesting because, yeah, I think you can specialize, and you can specialize in multiple different areas in pen testing. And I don't want to like dissuade people from doing anything. Like if you like networks, you can definitely have a career as a network pen tester. Absolutely. I would say there's obviously more of a demand for web app pen testing just because naturally there's just way more web apps. So there's obviously going to be just, you're going to need more web app pen testers. And so I think that's where I personally would recommend people just, maybe start out and see how that goes, especially because with bug bounty, like most bug bounty, like 99% of bug bounty is web apps. And so that's the stuff you can get into. And I feel like a lot of more resources out there are web app focused as well.
Yeah, and that matches my experience. I was not great at web apps until I started applying for pen testing jobs and realized I needed to be good at web apps. And like where I work, when we hire a junior pen tester, that's the main skill we're looking for is strong web app pen testing and assessment skills. Like the network stuff, we can teach that, and same as you, like the bulk of our assessments are web apps. So that's what people need to be strong in. And what I love about your resources, like I was checking out your website leading up to our interview a little more closely, and one of the things that stood out to me is you have like over 60 web app pen testing interview questions that are like really solid. You have the question and then a detailed answer so people can prepare for the interview, specifically the technical part of the interview. But let's talk to that person. Let's say they are looking for that junior pen tester role. They got past the HR part. They finally have an interview coming up. They're going over your interview questions. What are some other resources or things that you would recommend so that they don't essentially do terrible in the interview process?
Yeah, I always feel like kind of weird about how I called them interview questions. I kind of almost regret it. Like, I honestly, I have like a commit that's like pending for that site that I'm like add a thing like, hey, if you're an interviewer, don't ask these and be like a jerk about it, because they were originally intended for like social media, and it was like, but these are questions that I would expect like someone more junior to just not maybe easily breeze through, but at least be aware. You know, if you're still asking me like what port HTTPS runs on, okay, sure, right. But like that's like it's just kind of a silly thing to ask a person who has like over 10 years experience testing web apps. So I was like, well, here are some really challenging, like if you're a person who has like over 10 years experience, these are the questions that not necessarily should trip you up. You might not be able to answer them completely off the top of your head, but you should at least be aware of the answer and be able to formulate some kind of decent response. Because nobody is perfect at interviews, right? Everyone's going to trip up. We're going to misspeak at some point. And so the point of the interview questions was more to be like, hey, these are some really difficult parts of web application security that you should probably know at some point in your career. And yeah, I feel like calling them interview questions is a bit harsh. Maybe I should like rename them. But I think ultimately, like, if as long as you know the basics, I think you'll be fine. And another thing that I really recommend, especially with web apps, and to be honest, with any kind of technology, if you're trying to get into pen testing and the exploitation side of things, like you should understand how the technology works. Like I would expect anyone going for an interview for a web app pen tester to be like, I should be able to ask some basic questions about HTTP and get some decent responses. And I've done that in the past when I've been the interviewer at a company. I've asked like some kind of basic HTTP based questions and had really like a range of responses. I've had like juniors who've answered them really well, and I've had like more senior people who have just completely like been flummoxed by them. And so that's really interesting to me because I would expect like HTTP is basically what the underlying sort of technology behind web applications. That's how the browser communicates with a web app. So I think, if you don't know that, then that's kind of, I don't know, scary if you're going to an interview and you don't understand HTTP. And other like server side technologies as well. If you don't understand what a database does, if you don't understand how the program code, the web application code interacts with the web server, right? That's important to know. And that's all stuff you can teach yourself. You can like just, there are so many free courses available online, and you can just spin up a web server like in a VM, right? You can install like LAMP, right? So Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. You can just do that. It's very easy to do, and just write your own mini web applications, and then investigate how they work. So I think understanding that core principles is really important.
That is so good. And if anyone hears meowing in the background, my cat really wants to be part of the interview. So he's like been trying to jump on my lap. But you mentioned, hey, there's ways you can teach yourself, ways you can learn. Let's talk about that, right? So probably the three main platforms that come to mind, at least for me, you have TryHackMe, Hack the Box / Hack the Box Academy, and PortSwigger Academy as well. Now, Pete, like at least half of the people are going to disagree with you, but I'm going to ask the question. Which platform is best? Which platform do you enjoy the most out of those three? Or am I missing a platform that I should include in this for your own learning?
I mean, so those are definitely like the three main ones for like quote unquote free learning, even though technically two of them are also paid, right? So TryHackMe and Hack the Box have paid subscriptions, but you have access to a lot of content for free. For web applications, I still think PortSwigger like reigns supreme, mostly because it's free, but also because effectively what the PortSwigger Web Academy is, if you aren't aware, there's a book that was written by David Stullard, who runs PortSwigger, which is the Web Application Hacker's Handbook. And he wrote the first version and then version 2, and I think version 2 was released in like 2005 or something. It's an old book. But it's kind of just like, it's so important to web app hacking, at least it was back in the day. And whenever he was asked like, hey, when's version 3 coming out? Because it's, the web's moved on. He never really released a version 3, but basically that's what the Web Academy is. I'm pretty sure they've basically said that as well. Like the Web Academy is version 3 of the book. And it's ever evolving, and it just has so many cool labs and just ways to play around again for completely for free. That I think it's teaching a lot of really cool stuff. So I would always go for Portswigger Web Academy for web app stuff. And then if you're gonna ask me like the network stuff, like I'm not gonna take sides. Hack the Box and TryHackMe are both really good platforms. Like they've both come along in recent years as well. Like they're just leaps and bounds. So it's really nice to see those two companies like doing really well in that space as well.
So good. And when it comes to Portswigger, one cert that I think a lot of people aren't maybe aware of or recognize as much is the BSCP, right? The Burp Suite Certified Practitioner. What are your thoughts on that certification through Portswigger? Is it actually valuable for landing a job in the industry? Is it worth getting? Just overall, what are your thoughts on that?
I've never actually taken it. It's like on my to-do list, but I'm also like one of those people where I'm at the point in my career where like I don't really need certs. Like anything is it's just a little bit extra, because like I have a whole body of work and like employers that can vouch for me. So it's really like is it worth me taking time to do? And I'll do it at some point, but from what I've heard from people who've taken it, it's really difficult. So yes, it's probably something that's going to look really good on your resume just because there aren't that many people who have actually managed to get it. But it's definitely a tricky exam. So I think you only get like 3 hours and you have to compromise 3 things. And yeah, it's, as far as I'm aware, it's just really, really tricky. But it's only like $100. So it's a really cheap exam. And all the training material is free as well. So like literally they're like, hey, as long as you like do most of the practitioner level labs on the academy, they're like you'll be able to pass the exam if you do all those labs. So yeah, honestly it's very affordable, and yeah, I expect it's a very good thing to have on your resume.
Yeah, same thing I've heard. We have a few people just recently who have received it, and super difficult, but super realistic and good for learning both web app pen testing, bug bounty, all of those things. And Jesse Johnson over on Twitch said he can't hear me super well, maybe on my end. Other people are saying it's fine. Hey guys, for those of you watching, I did adjust the audio a little bit. Let me know if this is any better as far as the audio levels go. But Tiberius, for you're kind of beyond, way beyond that, like going through a TryHackMe learning path to learn this stuff. You know this stuff really well, but as you know, the world is constantly changing. Cybersecurity is constantly evolving. Are there any platforms or resources you personally use to keep on learning, staying up to date with changes and new exploits?
Yeah, ironically, Twitter. I think just being active in the community. You obviously see lots of like cybersecurity news, and there's a bunch of bug bounty hunters on Twitter. And the cool thing about bug bounty as well, obviously that it has done for the community is exposed a lot of people, and has sort of triggered new research, because you have these bug bounty hunters that spend a lot of time on a specific program, and they think they've found something, and they just keep going at it and keep going at it and find some like weird new exploit or weird new bypass, and then ultimately a lot of the time they'll like write a blog post about it, or they'll do a video, and that like spreads around on social media a lot. So I think social media in general is a really good thing to get involved in. Also because it's just networking, like it's putting your name out there. It's you're engaging with the community. You can learn a lot from like the resources that people share on social media for sure.
That's good. And the other thing that you've done that I think is helpful is not only have you done CTFs and you live streamed them, but you've created a few. So like even on TryHackMe for sure, I know you have some Prevest stuff. You have, I'll say it right, SQL, even though I call it SQL, SQL injection room that tripped me up, that teaches the and or type stuff. And when I was doing it, I really enjoyed that. So just share with us a little bit about that. What have you learned from being on the creator side of things? And for those who want to create their first TryHackMe or Hack the Box room or machine, are there any pieces of advice you'd recommend that maybe you learned the hard way?
Yeah. It's honestly, I do enjoy creating the CTF boxes. I wish I had time to do more of them. I think that the main issue for me is with the big platforms. It's sort of a double-edged sword because with TryHackMe especially, it's extremely like that. Their creator platform is really easy to use, so it's really nice. But their review process, because they have so many boxes being submitted, like I submitted the SQL injection one. I think it was back in January of, was it last year? It might have been last year. And then like it only got released like 9 months later, I think.
Sure.
So it was like crazy, like a really long process. And Hack the Box I think is a little similar. I think they may have a slightly shorter review period, but they also don't have the design tools that TryHackMe has. However, Hack the Box do pay for content as well, which is kind of nice. So yeah, I honestly like. I honestly wish there was like a platform that was like an amalgamation of both, where you like you could have the design tools of TryHackMe, and you could just get published almost like immediately. Like maybe have like a community review or something. Like maybe that's something I need to create at some point. But
The
yeah,
Tiberius Academy, the Tiberius training ground. There you go. That'd be amazing.
So yeah, and in terms of like lessons learned, I think the most important one is, and it almost sounds contradictory, but it's really difficult to create an easy box. And that's because you have like the gift of hindsight as a box creator.
Yeah.
Like you understand from the get-go, when you're designing the box, how the box is going to be solved. And when you know how something's solved, it's actually really difficult to sort of design it in such a way that it's easy to solve, because you're always making these assumptions. Oh yeah, well, a person would find this directory clearly, and you're like, well, yeah, would they though? Like, what if they, is it in like a really popular list of directories? Is it like, or have you like been a bit tricky? And that's what I design puzzles like almost like little mini CTF puzzles at a company I used to work at like years ago, and everyone was really like challenged when it was time to like create easy puzzles, because yeah, it's super difficult, because you want it to be fun as well. But the problem is, if you keep adding more complexity to it, it just becomes so much harder to solve. And so I think, yeah, if you want to create an easy box, you really have to, focus on and make sure that you're not trying to make too many assumptions, and that it's like it can actually be easily solvable. Like, and it's okay if you want to make an easy box, just don't be too put off when people actually solve it, right? Because that's the whole point. But also, if people end up, if you want to make a fun box that's easy but it ends up being a medium box, that's okay too. Like, just make a medium box. Like, so I think that's my advice would be like, make sure if you're trying to make an easy box, just don't overthink it, and try and keep it really super simple, and don't add too many gotchas, because you'll end up with people just going down complete rabbit holes and missing totally obvious things.
Yes, really good stuff. And changing gears a little bit, I want to talk about one of the hot button issues as of late, and that is Offsec and the OSCP, right? So they recently announced the OSCP Plus, and we were both in the blog. You didn't realize it till I told you about it, but we were quoted like in their blog about the OSCP Plus, saying, "Hey, check out these resources and these videos." And they've recently been acquired again, a second time. They were already owned by a private equity group. Now it's just a different private equity group, but that kind of blew up for a little bit. I'm just curious your thoughts and maybe your best guess on the future of OffSec, especially as we have organizations like Hack the Box with their CPTS that's kind of beginning to grow, and TCM Security has been around for a while now with the PMPT, kind of their flagship cert, as well as all the other certs they have released. Do you see OffSec lessening their grip on the industry at all, or is this just par for the course and not much is going to change from your perspective?
I think when I heard the announcement on Twitter, I retweeted someone and was like, well, that's Offsec done for then. So,
RIP.
um, yeah, I don't know. I have a history with being acquired. Like companies I work for, like seemingly just get acquired, and I have a really bad history with it.
So when Tiberius works for your company, brush off your resume because it's going to get acquired soon.
Hopefully not. But I honestly, I'm probably it's probably not like completely accurate, but every time a company gets acquired, I see it as sort of a death knell for that company. Like I don't know. I think especially from what I've heard, if you get acquired by a private equity company, especially, it's not because necessarily they think you're doing really well. It's because they basically want to try and rescue a failing company that they can buy cheap and try and turn a quick profit on and sell like later on. And I mean, and again, maybe that isn't the case here. It's certainly not rules. I'm sure that there have been private equity companies that have bought failing companies, turned them around, kept them on, and they've done amazingly well. I doubt that's going to happen here just because of Offsec's history. Like Offsec just keep raising prices, and the rest of the industry is going not necessarily the opposite direction, but they're creating new certs that are better and cheaper. And I don't think Offsec's going to be able to function that long. And I don't feel like a private equity company is going to come along and be like, oh yeah, we should definitely, release more content for cheaper. That I just don't see a private equity company doing, because, even though that's the right thing for the company to do, and even though I think ultimately that would be more profitable down the line, a lot of these companies want quick profits. And generally speaking, the way you get quick profits is you increase prices because you've already got a base that's going to, buy them. And especially when you have companies that effectively require OSCP or a resume, then yeah, you're going to have people who will pay that money, which kind of sucks. So I honestly, as much as I think Offsec were a force for good in the early days, I think we need more companies to emerge with better certs, and we need to normalize those certs for the industry instead of just relying on Offsec.
Very interesting. We have like almost the same exact thoughts on this. Like when I did the OSCP was back in 2021, 2022, I viewed it as like this absolutely amazing certification. And then when I got the material, it was like just a bloated PDF in a lab environment, at least at that time, that was like broken half the time. I think it's gotten better from when I ended up taking it, but I was disillusioned a little bit, not a little bit, a lot. I mean, I wrote a rap song about it, for crying out loud, about when I went through Offsec and the OSCP. But when it comes to the OSCP, do you still recommend it? Like, do you still consider it? Someone talks to you right now saying, hey, Tiberius, I want to get into the industry as a pen tester. Would you say, hey, you should get the OSCP still, or no, and why?
I think so, but only because it looks good on a resume. Like it's not going to teach very many skills. And this is, I mean, it's kind of dumb because it's like I made, I'm not going to say a massive amount of money, but quite a lot of money off 2 courses I made purely because the OSCP didn't teach privilege escalation, which was required for the exam. Yeah. So, I think that just goes to show. And those courses still have several hundred students buying them each month. So it hasn't changed. Like, I would, and it might sound weird, but I would love for people to like stop buying my courses because Offsec teaches privilege escalation properly. I think that would be great, even though it would be like a net loss for me personally. But it would show that they actually understand the issue, which is they aren't teaching the stuff that's needed for the exam. But yeah, for a long time, the issue honestly was that even the course didn't teach stuff that pen testers were using. That's changed. Like, to give them credit, the Active Directory stuff they teach now, because Active Directory is basically most network pen testing these days. I still think absolutely being able to exploit, vulnerabilities through Metasploit, and other things is good. To that end, I think they should just allow Metasploit on the exam. I really don't understand why that's still a restriction. It's kind of dumb. So yeah, I would say, like, if they really want to do a pen test exam, they should actually, make it realistic and allow people to use all the tools that pen testers actually use on the exam. Just, if you have to make the exam slightly harder, then just do that. Pen testing is difficult. The exam can be difficult, but I think ultimately it's still good for the resume just because it's OSCP. It still holds that weight, regrettably almost.
Yes. Yes, and I first heard about you, I think, when I was studying for the OSCP, and I was on Reddit, and I was looking for resources, and like people recommended TCM. That was back when I think the only course by TCM was a practical ethical hacking course when I first did it, and that was an incredible resource. They of course recommended your courses on privilege escalation, and they recommended a little tool that you made that has become like relatively well known as Auto Recon. Now, for those who are somehow unaware of what Auto Recon is, explain to us what it is and just how you had the idea for it as you were studying for the OSCP.
Yeah, so auto recon, it's kind of self-descriptive. It automates your recon, right? So it's one of the most misunderstood, I think, things about the OSCP exam is you're not allowed to use auto exploitation, which is fair. I think that bit's fine. So you're not allowed to just run scripts that like find vulnerabilities and then exploit them and say, hey, we got a shell here. You are allowed to automate the enumeration of services. So the more obvious one is you can run a script which will find an HTTP server running on port 80 and then get it to automatically start looking for files and directories, right? That's absolutely fine. And honestly, with the exam being 24 hours, which it shouldn't be, but it is, you need to automate stuff. If you don't automate stuff, you're just shooting yourself in the foot. So auto recon effectively does that. It will first do nmap scans to figure out which ports are open, which services are open running on those ports, and then it will launch a bunch of scans specific to those services. It's been redesigned, so it's technically Auto Recon 2 now, because Auto Recon 1 was just a complete mess of code that I hated for years. Auto Recon 2 is much more modular. It has a plugin system. So anyone can technically add plugins to it. You can write your own, just dump them in like a plugins directory and add functionality to it. But I think it's really good. I think it does a really good job. I think it's possibly one of the better tools out there, compared to a few. Just mostly because you can customize it so much. Like the customizability is one of the things that I really focused on in version 2. And I just wish more people would submit plugins, to be honest. But I don't know. Maybe it's absolutely perfect the way it is. It's not, but please submit plugins.
Yes, and I'm guessing I could have pulled it up and checked, but I'm assuming you have like contribution guidelines and everything on that for those who want to submit plugins. Like they can check it out right now, correct? Is there any like gotchas for submitting a plugin that people should be aware of?
Not really. I think I did write a small contribution guide to it. There's a whole plugin API, but honestly, if you just look at the plugins that come with it, because it comes with a bunch of them already, just copy what I've done, rename everything, and it's honestly, I tried to make it as easy as possible to write a plugin because I understood that nobody really likes writing these things. So if I could just make it really simple, then people would be more likely to do it. But yeah, I think go check it out. And if you have an idea for a plugin, like it's pretty good the way it is. Like, I think most people haven't written plugins because there's just really almost no need.
Sure.
There is obviously like only so much you can realistically do with enumeration of several services, but I think for sure there's definitely some things that other people might be able to do.
That's good. And kind of one takeaway for those of you watching, if you want to get into the industry, one of the best things you can do is contribute to an open source project like Auto Recon, because you can then include that on your resume and employers can see that. So I'm curious, Tiberius, you've mentioned before that you've done a lot of interviews as the interviewer. How does open source contributions and things like that compare to certifications? If you had to choose one or the other, which one stands out more to you, the OSCP or having GitHub and contributing to all these open source resources, which of course is free to do?
It's an interesting one. I think for sure certs still hold a lot more weight, and that's mostly because with a cert you have a trusted, well, quote unquote trusted body that's basically saying, hey, this person has proved that they've, done the work, that they've passed the exam. And I'm not trying to like dissuade people from writing code or contributing to open source projects or having a GitHub. I think that's really important too. My issue with it is that puts more of an onus on the interviewer to do like a deep dive and check.
Sure.
And this has actually come up in the past where, like, I don't even remember the guy's name, but basically a person approached me and was like, hey, for my, like, as part of my degree, I want to, like, contribute to an open source project. Can I contribute to Auto Recon? And I was like, yeah, sure. And then they never did. And it's like, I don't know if they ever used that on their resume. But it's like, it's just kind of awkward when you like, when you get people saying, hey, can you like write an email to my, my university lecturer saying that I contributed to this project? And I'm like, well, you didn't contribute anything. Like, you haven't actually contributed any code to it. So I think that's an issue. And a lot of the time, and this is actually an issue I've had recently. So GitHub, especially, I maybe this is just me, and maybe this is just a really bad habit. When I find a project on GitHub that I really like, and it could even just be a repo that someone's of like just a brain dump of, hey, these are all Active Directory commands. I'll star the repo for sure, but I'll also fork it. And I do that because in the past I've been burned because I've started a repo, and then when I've gone back to like, oh, I know a repo where I can find this information, and it's been deleted. And I'm like,
sure.
Damn. So I automatically almost fork repos, because at least then I have a copy, right? And this got me burnt a few weeks ago, actually, because somebody was like, hey, Tiberius wrote this amazing Active Directory like cheat sheet. It's here on his GitHub. And I had to like go on LinkedIn to this girl's post and be like, I appreciate you sharing this, but I did not write this. Like, please give credit to this person. This was literally, I just forked it. And so I feel like, going back to like the original question, like, yeah, you could have a really active GitHub repo full of repositories for code that you may not have contributed anything to. And you may just be collecting repos like I do. I don't know. It's definitely a tricky question. I think the main issue with having like open source code contributions is it's just difficult to sort of tie that directly to you as a person. Unless it's an actual project that you can prove, like, oh yeah, I wrote all the code for this, or here's my actual contributions in like a bunch of commits.
Yeah, that makes sense. And dude, believe it or not, we're like coming to the end of the interview. We have 9 minutes left, but I have so many more questions. We'll have to do a part 2 sometime. But I would love to talk about content creation, because something I wrestle with is sponsored content versus free content versus paid courses versus free courses. You, of course, have some paid courses, super affordable. I think the last time I checked, it's like, I'm going off memory, $26 for both of the Privest courses or something along those lines. So really affordable. But I've always struggled with that. And I had, of course, did a thing with Network Chuck. And if anyone is good at monetizing stuff, it's the coffee Chuck guy who's like every 3 minutes, he's like, hey, buy my coffee. And I remember at DEF CON as well, I had a good conversation with Jerry from Simply Cyber. And he's like, Tyler, you need to not be so hesitant about charging people and always doing everything for free. But did I struggle with that? So I'm just curious your thoughts as it comes to balancing paid stuff and free stuff. You have a whole bunch of free content on your website. You also have some paid content. Do you do video sponsors? Just how do you personally wrestle with those different issues in our community?
Yeah, I think it's definitely difficult because obviously I don't want to speak ill of anyone who's doing sponsored content. Because a lot of them are my friends. And ultimately for a lot of people, this is part of the way they earn a living. And so I think when it comes to courses, I feel like as long as you're like, as long as you've actually put the work in and you're delivering something that's going to be informative to somebody, I think it's fine to charge for obviously knowledge like that. And some people will disagree with me, but whatever. I put a lot of work into those privilege escalation courses. I don't feel like I'm overcharging people for them. I do like a bunch of deals and everything. So yeah, I feel like that's fine. In terms of like the video content, I'm a bit iffy when it comes to like sponsors. Like I actually recently did close a sponsorship deal. But I set like rules for myself because I really don't like doing ad reads for products that I don't believe in. Like I find it kind of disingenuous when somebody does an ad read and it's like I even get just it's even annoying when like celebrities do it on TV. Like I use this like credit card and it's like you don't use a credit card. Like you're a multi-millionaire. I very much doubt you use a credit card to get the points, right?
Yeah.
So for me, it's like I don't really like lying to my audience, and so I only if you ever see a sponsor on any of my YouTube videos, it's gonna be because either I actually personally use the product myself, right, and I was lucky enough to get them, or I think it's actually a good product that my viewers would actually, benefit from. I'm not going to be like doing a sponsor for some random service that I don't use or I don't think is a actual legitimate service just because they're paying me money for. So, maybe I'm shooting myself in the foot doing that, but that's just the way I operate personally. And again, I have absolutely I have no issues with any other creators doing it. Like if that's what they want to do, that's fine. Like I'm not gonna diss anyone for that. It's just not personally how I operate. So yeah, it's a difficult thing because I mean it is only usually like a minute ad read, and you can get quite a lot of money for it. And a lot of the time you can just skip over it. So it's like it's a tricky question, but personally I'm just not comfortable myself doing it.
Yeah, I think that's a good balance. And thank you for sharing, man. That is some good wisdom. And when it comes to content creation, you of course stream on Twitch. You also have YouTube stuff. That's the same thing that I do. For those watching, a lot of people watch us and think, hey, I should start doing that. Have you noticed the benefits of content creation? Like has your channel or Twitch come up in job interviews? Has it allowed you to land more jobs or even pen tests? Like is it worth doing, essentially, starting content creation stuff as a means of breaking into the field from your perspective?
I think so, for sure. Mostly just because you'll also get to know a lot of really cool people in the community. I mean, and maybe that's going to change because if we get more people doing cybersecurity content creation, then the community is just going to get massively large. It's actually a really small community right now. Like, super tiny. So, honestly, if you get into content creation, like you'll at some point you'll be invited into the community and you'll be chatting with people like John Hammond, Offsec, Live Overflow, Insider PhD, and sharing sharing resources with them and getting advice from all those people. So that's really cool as well. But I think ultimately, yeah, it's the more you can like interact with the community and get your face out there and get your content out there, I think it's always going to be a net positive, I think. Just because it's just another thing that you can add and another thing you can show, another skill set. It's also like a soft skill, like being able to present, right? A lot of companies will see that as a good thing, not only because it means you can probably present to a customer, but you can also give talks and, you know, potentially do conferences. So that's always going to be a good thing as well. So yeah, absolutely. We'll always recommend content creation.
Excellent. And hey, for those of you watching, I did promise a giveaway at the end. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to drop a link to a Google form in the chat. So this should go across all the different platforms. I think LinkedIn doesn't like Restream, so I'll drop it in LinkedIn separate. But this is a Google form that asks for your name and I think email just to verify you're legit. Just to be clear, I'm not collecting your information. It's not going to any organization. I'm not going to send you emails. I promise. And for those of you watching, if you don't have a community to learn with, you can join Hack Smarter. If you go to hacksmarter.org, this interview is sponsored by me, Hack Smarter. So go to hacksmarter.org and join our Discord. But I'm going to drop a link right now to that Google form. It's only going to be open for about 5 minutes. So if you want to be included in the giveaway, fill that out. If you try to be dumb and fill it out more than once, thinking that will increase your chances, all duplicates get completely removed and you don't get anything at all. So I just dropped the link in all the platforms went through. So grab that link and make sure you fill it out so you can be eligible for that. And finally, I don't know why this is showing the wrong title over on Restream. I think I have things figured out over there. But Tiberius, we are like wrapping up. I didn't even make it through, I think, half of my questions I had for you. But dude, thank you again for taking the time. Any just last words of wisdom, advice you would have for us as we continue through the rest of our week?
Oh, goodness. No, you put me on the spot. That's the one question I was not prepared for. I don't know. Just honestly, like, keep learning. Like, that's the real. If you want to succeed in cybersecurity, keep learning. Like, you just can't stop. And you know, there are so many resources out there now to learn that you don't really have any excuse. So that's the recommendation I would make. Keep learning. Subscribe to a bunch of content creators. You know, watch awesome streams by myself and Tyler and other people. And yeah, just keep active in the community.
Cool. Good advice. And thank you again, Tiberius. For all of you watching, hey, thank you for taking the time to watch. If you don't sub to Tiberius, make sure you do, both on Twitch and over on YouTube. Just released some really good content on OWASP. I still need to watch it, and I wanted to talk about that, but we didn't have time on the OWASP Top 10. But maybe in part 2 we'll talk about Tiberius. Thank you for being here.
We definitely need a part 2 now, yeah.
Yeah, we do.